All right, so here we are for another Dorrier Underwood conversation. My name is Laura Neff. I am here with Carol Orndorff and Doug McVaden of Dorrier Underwood, and this is another conversation in a series we're creating about what it's like to live and lead and work in this new world we find ourselves in the midst of that's changing hour by hour right now. So, Carol,
yeah, we're all of a sudden your private space that you've thought of as your private space is now your workspace and your public space, and you got other people in it. All of a sudden, Laura's looking at me, and I have to wonder, does my shirt look right?
Let me say one more thing. So for those of you watching, what we don't intend for this to be is a list of 5 tips and tricks about how to work from home, or like this is a conversation between 3 of us about what it's like real time to be in this new world where we're relating and trying to get things done together virtually, remotely, all of it. And so listen into our conversation, listen for how this is, what you can get for yourself from what we're saying to one another about our lived experience of this time. Okay.
Well, like that, I have to be willing to be interrupted, or we have to be willing to talk on top of each other.
Well, I was just going to say that. That this is not a rehearse. This is a true conversation we are having, and we're sharing with you. And this is the way it goes a lot. We all are excited. We all have something to say, and sometimes we all jump in, just like we do when we're, in a group with people.
And there are some things you can't do, like I can't slide Laura a note. What I might do if we were doing a meeting like this in person, I might say, hey, Laura, let's get to this next, or I might have my outline and point to it. So we come up with different ways, though, because we use the chat, right? We use the chat on Zoom now, and I have to keep remembering to look at that, because I've infuriated some people because I've been blithely going along on Zoom, and they've been chatting away at me, giving me all these saying, I need a restroom break, and I'm not looking. So, attuning, that's part of what I'm learning, is to be attuned to the people in the room and think of them as being in the room with me. Take some extra work.
So on our last conversation that we recorded, in the midst of it, we have 3 dogs at my house, and varying levels of boisterousness. And in the midst of it, I had a downstairs dog making some noise. I have a dog in the room with me that started doing the little ruff, ruff, that often precedes very loud, sharp, high-pitched barking. And I put myself on mute, but it's what I'm getting right now, even as we're starting to talk about this, is that I have an undercurrent of awareness that at any moment the cacophony could begin, and I have to it's like every single moment I'm getting ready to deal with that reaction that I will have because of the noise out there. And
haven't we also heard that clients, I don't think I'm just imagining this, although I can easily imagine it, but we've actually heard that clients are on edge too. They think somebody's going to walk in, like their spouse is going to walk in and say, what are you doing? Or, so there's going to be, so that's interesting, right? Because that's a different level of distraction than we've typically had to deal with. Usually you go to your office and you can stop thinking about all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and I can speak to that one. I have somebody I live with here, and while she knows that I work all day, she doesn't know when I'm recording, or she doesn't know when I'm on a live video, and she's trying to live in this house with me. And all of a sudden I'll hear the ice machine in the background, and I'm looking for the mute button, which on the one hand, I'm trying to be polite to my team, and on the other hand, I'm like, this is somebody I love, I live with.
Yeah.
And we're learning how to be in this together.
Yeah, we're all in the midst of it. My husband could walk in any minute, and I would probably have a reaction like, oh, I told you I was going to be on this thing. Like, that would rise up inside of me. Like, man, come on. I told you I was going to be on a call, and it was important, and I needed quiet, and why are you here? But that's all on the inside. Meanwhile, I'm trying to look put together on the outside is how it.
Yeah. So one of the things that this is both the additional challenge and the additional opportunity of this new environment. One is that we actually have to have conversations with the people that we live with about what we're going to do and how we're going to act. And normally we just act however we act, and they kind of put up with us or we put up with them. It's sort of, we have to have a ground rules conversation. You know, what are the ground rules of operating here? And that really brings up a lot of things. You know, it makes you think, well, you know, maybe there are ground rules for just living together, you know,
That's right.
not just dealing with video. And then the other part is, you know, not only have to have that relationship with them, but you have to share your work, like share what you're working on, because they're hearing it. And I think that's a challenge, you know, like we haven't thought about saying what you're working on in a way that, I don't know, sometimes I have to come up with a way that's not upsetting. You know, I need to be responsible that I'm the dad, and I've got to have a profile to my family that I'm confident and that things are going well and I'm working. So, you know, and I can't come out of my office and say, oh, geez. You know, I've just had an effect on the whole family. The whole family's now, if things aren't going well for dad or things aren't going well for his company, it's like, and that may not even be true. That may be my realizing I forgot my coffee downstairs. That's why I'm saying, oh, geez, you know. But I mean, you know, you got to be responsible for how you come across, or the, I would call it the vibe you put out, you know, like that.
Well, last week I was working with a client, and it was his first week home. And so were the kids home and his wife. And he was telling me about how he turned his, I don't know, playroom into it was a guest room. He turned a guest room into his office because it was the only door in the house.
Yes.
But then he said, but guess what? When I'm done with this call, I can go have lunch with my kids. Mm-hmm. He never has lunch with his kids.
Yeah, big bonus. Yeah.
Yeah, Doug, you said earlier that in a conversation we had earlier that this time and what it's asking of us in terms of changing how we interact and work and are productive, that it occurs as a constriction or an upset because it's a change, and we didn't pick the change. It happened. It's happening to us, right? But that this we could take the case and have a stand that this actually is going to be an enhancement, that more can happen this way, but it's not going to be accidental necessarily. There are things to think about.
Yeah, I mean, really, there is a move forward. If we think of it as a move forward instead of a move back, which it really is, we're moving forward into the virtual space. We weren't in it, so it's not something we're going back to as a fallback plan. We're moving forward into a new space, a new way to deal with it. I thought of this, that it's almost like Earth has gotten untenable, so we've had to go into space. You know, and now everybody's different because there's no oxygen. So you can't talk to people without your spacesuit on so you can get oxygen. You know, it's that much of a shift that like everything that you used to depend on, gone. Can't depend on that anymore. Now you're out here just like everybody else floating around. You've got your little box and that's all you've got. So you got to start to be responsible for that. And how are you going to be effective now? And then I think people have already discovered ways to be effective that now they're leaning into to be really effective, in fact, increase effectiveness. You know, that whole idea of having ground rules with your family, being respectful of the noise that they make, being tolerant of the noise that they make, and not getting so annoyed. That's a higher level of relating. You know, that here I'll get philosophical. It's like could be a significant shift in society, you know, and how we treat each other. And that new kind of norms in society could stem from this, you know, more politeness, but not politeness in a stilted way, you know, but politeness as in making room for another person's being and another person's space and allowing them in, and allowing, you know, we were talking about the kids come in to the screen and including that, have a spirit of, I'm going to include things I've considered distractions in the past. Now, I'm not saying that as a tip, like, oh, include distractions. I'm saying, what if we fundamentally shifted our context so that things that had occurred as distractions actually didn't even occur for us as a distraction. So I'm not being really great with my kids. I'm just including them because I always do, because it's part of what you do with human beings when they're in a room. You acknowledge that they exist.
Right.
You don't
Right.
pretend,
Well, and
you don't pretend they're a bookshelf. Yeah. But,
to keep, part of what I see is that to keep relating to family or whoever's in the space as a distraction has me less able to focus than if I just included it in the first place, dealt with it,
yeah.
something to deal with, and then it's not like I'm not being weird trying to pretend like there's nothing going on when there's something going on. That's just
Yeah.
like
It makes me want
Well,
to tell you, let the freaking dogs bark, and
Yeah.
like, and then if they get really loud, I'll tell you. It's like almost like, hey, Laura's got dogs. I'd rather have you unconcerned based on what you said. You're always on edge. I don't know. They haven't started barking yet, so I may change my mind if they really start barking. But I mean, in concept, I'm thinking, well, that would be the example in this case is, hey, Laura, don't worry about it. You have dogs. That's one of the great things about how great you are with animals, right? That's one of the great things about you as a person, if anybody knows you. And so why would we cleave that off from you and have you silence that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then there are real distractions like I can't hear the words you're saying. Well, that's a different level. I mean, right. It's a different level than, what you said about Carol about background noise. Right. That's one level. And then there's the level where you actually have to do something with it, like somebody's microphone doesn't work or something. Yeah.
Well, I want to address another aspect of working at home. There's a lot of great stuff we could say about learning how to relate to each other newly, because we're together all the time. But there's also the fact of the matter is we still got to produce results. So I loved what Laura said about if we can just include what's here, we're able to focus more. And one of the things that I am hearing from clients is that they're having to learn to do things differently. Like one of our clients who's in manufacturing, they're having to rethink their whole supply chain and where they're getting all their parts and pieces. And they're not afraid of it. They saw it coming, they responded to it, but they were able to focus and say, okay, can't do it this way, now how will we do it? So people are starting to ask the kinds of questions of themselves that's gonna invent new ways to do our work.
Yeah, I talked to somebody earlier, Carol, just to pick up on that said, actually, it's kind of invigorating. We're having to problem solve in real time. This is like, and I think the initial thought is like, oh my God, this is crazy. But then when they really stopped and looked, it's like, and it's pretty cool right now, actually. So
yeah.
It's like almost
No,
admitting
I got that same feedback from someone in my family, Laura, who said, okay, how are you all dealing with quarantine? And then ... Frankly, I'm really into it, she said, right? And then she was saying, because she was now inventing all these things and inviting people to things. And, it was, a time where you're not expected to go anywhere. You don't have any appointments to be. And so you can spend the extra time writing out that thing, illustrating it, sending it to people, like sort of a burst of creativity, that's coming from having this change. I won't even say extra time, because frankly, I'm not hearing that people have a lot of extra time.
I don't.
What movies are you going to watch and stuff? I can't quite relate to that, because
I'm a little envious. I'm like, well, hang on. Like,
they must not be reading their email. They must not be reading.
Yeah. Like, I don't know where you're working, but yeah.
Well, and that's where everybody came out right away with all these tips and tricks, like how to do this right and how to do this right. And I don't know about all that. They think they're well intended, and some of them I even tried, right away, like, oh yeah, I should do that. But then we're discovering some of them we would think the exact opposite. Like Laura, you were telling us that your husband was reading about keep yourself unmuted the whole time.
Yeah.
So you don't fumble with the mute button. That was a tip. And we would say, no, get good at the mute button, because you got all this background noise and you want to respect the people in your family. You don't want to put them on a microphone when they don't know it. So we would say, that was tip number one. We would say wrong.
Yeah. Tip number two was don't move your facial muscles, or don't make too many expressions, because it's distracting. It's like, just sit there like a stone robot until your mouth needs to move because you have
that does sound like something written by someone my age. because I would think that I would need to have it together and be like a news broadcaster on TV where you're trying to keep a straight face for the whole thing. And I was telling you about this, Laura, about my daughter, and she never talks that way to her friends. And she's talking virtually all the time, Snapchat, FaceTime, and they got the hands going, and they even make themselves into a cartoon while they're talking. It's like the more interesting and the more stuff going on, the better. It makes it easier to pay attention, or just more interesting than the others. So I don't know, we're not going to trash anybody by name, but like we're reading this thing of the first 2 out of the 5 tips, we completely dissed and told them, said, go the opposite. So we're just in the middle of, because I can see where those are coming from, trying to make people be professional at home.
Well, that said too, it could also be, there are a lot of situations where people are in a meeting and what they really want to do is go, really, like seriously, they want to roll their eyes or make a fit, like something strikes them as just like, are you freaking kidding me? So that there is something to attend to, like, and maybe this is a conversation for another time, is informing your face intentionally, right? So I think that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. So what comes to me is because now we've given both sides of both those tips, right? Like yes, but then also not. And so I think what we're saying to Dorrier Underwood is that we don't know what the tips and tricks are, because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
It needs to be situationally based, and needs to depend on who you're talking to and what you're trying to accomplish in the call. And so I think, our rule would be, don't follow rules, look for yourself and figure it out, figure out what works and what works for the people that you're
or Doug said another way, maybe create your own rules, especially about how you're going to operate in the house with other people.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a good point to stop for now.
Okay, great. Join us
Thank you
again
both.
soon for another Dorrier Underwood conversation. Is that what we say at the end?
That's what we say at the end. All right. Thanks.